So welcome to the Chess for Knights class. I'm, for those who don't know, Grandmaster Eric Hansen. This is the start of me being here for 3 weeks, so you'll see me around if you come by any day of the week. And today I wanted to look at something I actually dreaded a lot when I was a kid. Endgames. Not like theoretical endgames, but endgames nonetheless. Recently there was a tournament going on in Russia, a very high-level tournament. And I was just looking at the games, and today we're going to look at a game between a couple Chinese grandmasters, strong ones. And what happens in grandmaster games sometimes is the guys resign in positions where most people wouldn't resign. And especially when I was younger, I'd like look at a game and be like, why did they resign here? Why didn't they play on? And what that is going to require us to do is analyze what they saw, why they didn't provoke the resignation. So we have a position here. I'm not going to get to the point. We're going to get to where one player resigned. It's only a couple moves from here. We're going to get to this position. It's black just played rook g8 to g2. So this is about 20 moves into the game. They've reached the rook endgame. If we take a minute to just analyze this, material's even. White's king is in the center. It can be good or bad, depending. But pawn structure-wise, white has 2 pawn islands and black has, well, really 4 pawn formations, 3 pawn islands, h7, f7, d6. So when I look at the pawn structure, I think that's a factor I think about in the endgame. That favors white. When I look at the rook activity, there's not many pieces. Let's look at the rooks. Well, white's rook is attacking b6, black's rook is attacking b2. Other rook has pressure on c4, and white's rook controls the e-file. So it looks a little balanced in terms of the rook activity, at least at first glance. Otherwise, white's king is probably better than black's king, though. You want your king normally in the center. That's something to always consider. As long as you're not getting checkmated or something, it's so much nicer to use your king to defend the pawn than a rook. You want your rook to be active. So I would say, I like white's position. I don't know about you guys. I prefer white's position. That's my just initial, when I just look at it, I prefer white's position. Totally feel free if you guys have a question or disagree or think black is better, we can discuss it. But one thing, if white has a better pawn structure, and that's how I judged it, the pawn islands. After rook g2, white's move here, which I think black actually missed, surprisingly, a few moves ago, is very normal but very strong. So you have an option here. Rook takes d6 is white's one obvious move. What's black going to do after rook takes d6? Yeah. Yeah. Rook takes b2. So we're trading 1 for 1. And that might be good, that might be bad. When we take the d6 pawn, that is a passed pawn we're going to have afterwards. At the same time, black, when they take on b2, rook takes d6, rook takes b2. White's pawn structure is not as nice anymore, though. Now it's kind of technically 3 pawn islands to 3, and a2 is being attacked. So is that an even trade? I guess the question might be, can white protect his pawn structure? Does he have to trade? Do you have to trade 1 for 1? Do you have to trade 1 for 1 here? Or can you keep your pawn structure nice? Because otherwise white has an advantage with the pawn structure. It's important to not have pawn islands, because then they're not as loose, they support each other, and you don't need to defend them as much. Also, most of you guys know, probably 2 pawns, connected pawns, they can push each other, they can go down the board and protect each other. Whereas split pawns, it's kind of like in bowling, they're just very weak. They're just they can just be picked off. They can't support each other. They require a rook or a king to defend them. So white played b3 here. And sure, we're trading. Black can take on a2. Black can do rook takes a2 here. And again, we are trading a pawn for a pawn. But it's not the same type of pawn. First of all, pawns closer to the center are usually considered advantageous. maybe they, on the side they don't control as many squares. In this case, in the center, it keeps the pawn structure. We want to keep the pawn chain active. So pawns in the center are normally good because whoever controls the center, usually has more space. You can go to either side pretty easily. So black did not trade, but we see just a move like b3, which to me wasn't even obvious. Wouldn't necessarily be obvious. Is a very very important move. Now after if rook takes a2, rook takes d6. We did trade 1-for-1, but white's pawn structure is still intact. And so really, the main thing we're really analyzing is the pawn structure. There's rooks, and that's a very important part of the endgame. But white's advantage is entirely with the pawn structure. And if we want our d5 pawn, now it's a passed pawn, to be strong, we want the pawns behind it to be good. And at least with b3, our king is close to it, and it looks very hard for black to stop this pawn chain. So what actually happened? So white played b3, black played rook d8. They're like, that's not a good trade because that's a passed pawn for an a2 pawn. Protected passed pawn. A protected passed pawn is better than a passed pawn. Protected, by the way, means a pawn is protecting it. After rook e6, black resigned. So that, to me, that was like, why resign here? That's still very early, even for maybe a grandmaster standards. So black resigned after rook e3 to e6. Didn't play a single more move. I don't suggest you guys should resign early or things like that. But then when I look at a game like this, and it's not a game of mine, I ask myself, why did black resign? I don't just accept it. I'm like, just because they resign doesn't mean I think it's right. I have to see it for myself. So that's what I do when I study some games. And so here, I want to ask you guys, why did black resign? And you're not going to know entirely why, but what are some positions that look quite uncomfortable for black or look quite okay? So what that means is we have to go a bit deeper in this position because they didn't go any deeper. So after rook e6, black resigned. A sample way to start would be, well, black definitely didn't like something after rook takes a2. Rook takes d6. Let me ask you, how is the rook endgame with just one rook on the board? What do you guys think about this endgame right here? Because this is directly possible. Would it still be 4 pawns to 4 pawns? And there's a very common saying in chess, like all rook endgames are drawn. It's not the case, but a lot of rook endgames can be drawn. If you're good at defending rook endgames, you can defend down a pawn, sometimes down 2 pawns, and you can draw if you get really good at it. So there is some truth that, that a lot of them are drawn. But what do you guys think about this position? Was black right to be maybe afraid of this? We just, there's no necessarily right answer. We're just analyzing, so there's no right answer here necessarily. They didn't play it out. But what are some things we, look for both sides? Sure. So black's king is pretty bad. Like white's king is much better, going to gain some more space. Yeah. So white's king position is a very important fact. King position, I see this all the time. When you don't know what to do in the end game and you're looking for a move, if you can improve your king, do it. Get your king. The king is totally safe on d3. King position, the king is a very valuable piece. So white's king is better. That contributes to his advantage. The pawn structure, in my opinion, is better. That contributes to the advantage. But I still need to see more. I need to either see some variations or something. Why black can't trade off pawns or get their own pawns rolling. Any comments, guys? Yes? Yep. Did you have your hand up? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Oh, sorry. Go ahead first. Yes, that's a very important factor. Which, not all the pawns are equal. Whoever queens first usually wins these end games. Whoever has the potential to queen first. So, which side is easier? Is it easier for white to queen? Does everybody agree there? What's the plan though to try to queen that d pawn? Like it looks easier, but we still have to see some actual moves. They would have played the game out, and I think white would have won. But that's still not. We don't know. We won't play the same moves as that. I'm curious what you guys would do. So yes, the d pawn can push. It's further advanced. It's protected by its own pawns. So yes, it looks more attractive, but well, why is it still so good or so easy? We need some moves. For example, here, let's say it's black to move. Let's say I play like rook h2. Yes.
White's rook could simply go to b6 and block a pawn.
Why b6 and not d7? Why did you choose b6? There's two ways to attack it. You wanted to block it, and I'm curious why you did that. Some people might be inclined to play rook d7 to get the 7th rank and attack the pawns. Why rook b6? That's very good. That's very good. There's a couple of good points there. Getting the rook out of the way. Are we going to push the d pawn with our rook on d6 or anywhere on the d file? No, we need our pawn to get on the d file. So we do want to shift our rook away from that. Secondly, rook to b6, for sure we're going to win the b7 pawn. And you know, it's easy to slip up when you have two good options. Rook d7 looks good, but you know, there's still rook d7. Maybe they can play b6, maybe b5, but rook b6. There are no possibilities there in defending the b7 pawn, and then would have two passed pawns, and also the pawn would be free to push. So rook b6 would be a very, very good move, and yeah, for two reasons. We're winning the pawn on b7 for sure, and we're clearing up space for the rook. Rook h2. Let's say rook b6. Rook takes h5, rook takes b7. What do you think of this position? So we're just going a bit further. We're just seeing what could have happened. But in doing so, hopefully we learn a bit about, you know, these endgames. Yes? Any comments in the middle? Yeah, you sure. So, you know, let's look at the race. Now it's 3 pawns to 3 pawns, but now both sides have passed pawns. I mean, black has a couple passed pawns here. White has the ones in the center. Who do you guys prefer here? Yeah? Do you think white will win? Because in the end game, you know, yeah? Because in the end game, at a certain point, we almost have to try to figure out who's going to win. It's going to be a race. We have to almost calculate it out. It's like a position like this. White might be better, but better is a weird term when there's so few pieces on the board. We're either maybe winning or drawn or not. Let's go a bit further and do a pawn race. Let's say we're playing black. Let's say I play rook g5. Let's see who arrives first. Give me some moves for both sides. Give me some variations. I want to hear good, thorough variations. So I want to practice some calculation here. Yes? D6. Move for black. Let's say king e8. King e8. Is that good? King e8. Yeah. D7.
Check.
King d8. Yes. King d4. I'm going to play as black. h5. Try to look ahead, guys. My moves are very predictable. Yes. In the green? Yeah.
Move C rank up 1.
What's the square? Well, can you call it the square, or is it hard as c5? C5, okay. Yeah. C6. H3.
C7 check.
No, C7 check, double check. The C7, I'm going to take your pawn on D7. What's a better move than C7? Yeah, rook b8. And we're queening. And we're way ahead. I mean, the pawn isn't even on h2. So, I mean, looking back, I was trying to find, I was still like, this is still very early to resign, but I'm starting to see some reasons why black resigned. But then when I look at something like this, could black have improved? So is there anything else? I said rook h2 here. Is this just a winning endgame for white? Is this just really good for white? And if it is winning, then I mean, I thought the position was just a little bit better for white. I mean, if it's winning already, that's pretty serious. Without being up any material, without black playing really bad moves. Is this Is there something black can do better? Push their pawns on f5 or something? We're looking for both sides here. This is just us, you know, it's not my game or something, but I was just like trying to understand. I didn't think it was that bad. I thought, you know, you have a couple weaknesses, that's something, but to just have no hope? Yeah?
I think you should move the pawn on b7
Yeah.
to 6 to b5.
B7, well, B7 to B5, what are we going to do as white? Are we going to take or are we going to play C5? Do you want to split your pawns or do you want to get two connected pawns? What's better? Connected pawns. So what will white do? C5. So as I said, if you guys suggest the move and you guys can already think what the next move will be for the other side, give me more than one move. Let's practice that, because in Endgame there aren't as many possibilities. We can start predicting, and I mean the people who are good at Endgames are also calculating, you know, further, and you know, being able to see farther. So Endgame is definitely not the part of the game where we're playing one move at a time. So anything for black to do here, or you know, is this just a good resignation? Yeah. Because you guys wouldn't resign here, so. And you shouldn't. Yeah. Rook to a1? And then what's white going to do? Same as before, or what? So rook a1, we're going to play.
White will try to trap the pawns on that side.
Yeah, rook b6 again. Is black hopeless against this? And, okay, now the pawn is hanging, but is there anything black can do? Is it, or is this just. Because maybe if you guys see how easy it is that some of these endgames are winning, you might practice it a bit more. I didn't like studying endgames because I was always like, oh, I never get into endgames, or the endgames are boring. But if I can just win without even having to win a pawn, then that might change my mind. Yes?
Okay, so
Is there anything else black could have done where, you know, it's good to try to look for both sides. That's how you learn to be objective, and you learn to start predicting what your opponent will play. That'll save you time, that'll improve your calculation. So is there anything else black could have done here? Yeah.
black could have moved her king to g7.
Let's say king, okay, let's say king, well, in which position? Actually, it's black to move here. Otherwise, it's black to move here.
Yeah, black.
Yeah, king g7. What are we doing as white? Actually, there's something even better probably. Probably we can play h6 check. We can also play h6 check and kick your king right back. But if we go to the g8, it's mate, so he has to go here, but rook b6. a2 to a3 would be nice, just the rook on b6 also defends it. That's the... Because I know you guys wouldn't resign in the initial position, but is there any hope? Then, you know, if we're, I just want some space. Yep. The value of connected passed pawns. I mean, that should show, like, it trumps almost everything here, specifically. So, when you have connected passed pawns, you want to keep that. When you have a pawn chain, you want to keep that. But b3 is a very important move there. But I was looking at this, and it was just so surprising. Originally, but then I look and I don't see a single move for white for black here. But I'm waiting for you guys to agree with me. You guys don't have to agree with me. It's just I just look at these games until I'm like, yeah, you know, now until I understand. It's only until you understand. Don't take my word for it. But we can play this rook endgame out. That's how we improve our rook endgames. Play them out and make conclusions. So I want you guys to fight for black, because you guys wouldn't resign here. You guys will have bad rook endgames. We only have one guy trying, yes? I mean, black does not have to trade rooks. That's something here, by the way. Right here, we don't have to trade rooks. We could play rook b8. We could play rook e8. We don't have to trade rooks, and maybe we can try to get our rook to e7.
Rook c.
No.
Rook c8.
Rook c8? Yeah, let's go rook c8. It's not like, you know, we might be missing something. It's not that simple. So let's say, yeah, rook c8. Now, if b5, if we have time to play b5, white can't play c5. Rook c8. Are we still gonna play rook b6 here? What's going on after rook c8?
I think we should try to keep the rooks side by side.
Keep the rooks connected. Okay, so rook b6. Would you play rook b6?
Yeah, that's fine.
And now what's black gonna do? We know what black's gonna do here, I hope. Rook c7. We can play rook b8, but the rook is very passive on b8. If you can defend it like this, we also cover a few more squares. You guys agree which is better, rook c7 or rook b8 to defend the pawn?
C7.
Yes.
C7 by a long shot.
c7 by a long shot. Okay, c7 by a long shot. That's important because I've made that mistake before. So what about this position? Is this so good for white? I mean, what's going on here? I know you guys don't like endgames. That's why I'm bringing it up. I don't like endgames either. So is it better for black to keep 2 rooks on the board or 1 rook?
I think it's better for him to keep two.
Probably better to keep 2 rooks. That's probably something we can say here. Then we can defend b7. Yep.
So it's white's move.
Yep.
White d5 to white at d6 that threatens the rook.
And then, but as I said, after d6, we know what black's going to play, right? We're practicing. After d6, what's black going to play? There's only one move that defends b7 and doesn't lose the rook. After d6, black has to play rook d7, right? Is there anything else? Tell me.
He could go to e7.
No, you can't go to e7. You can take the pawn is on d6 now. d6 would be rook d7. But is that what you want to play? So I'm just. Is this a better version? Well, this is fighting for black. At least this is an improvement to me. But once we finish this out for white, once we figure out why black resigned this position or didn't want to go into this, once we get through this, guys, we'll get to play some games. But what did black not like about this position as well? Or just something that yeah. Because we're not even finding fighting chances in the other variation. So in this variation,
h6.
h5 to h6. That's a good move. Restricts the king. Now what do we do as black? What would you do as black?
I go to h2.
h2? Okay. I just want you guys to play it out. There's not necessarily a right answer here. I just want to see why somebody resigned in just a equal material rook endgame. b3 to b4, check, and then I'm going to check you again. I mean, this was, black could have played on and probably played this. I think this endgame is very good for white, but there's still a little bit of fight in. But definitely, you should keep both rooks on the board for black. And white's just going to try to create connected pass pawns. So here, you suggested h6. Let's say something like even h6 now. And now I want to play c5 and c6. And then rook b8 checkmate. So again, what matters is whose pawns are going to queen first. So for example, let's say we have some position like this. I play rook here. I want to trade off a pair of rooks. Or let's just say we say something like that. c5, rook g6. Let's say we trade everything off. Which pawn do we take with, for example?
Yeah,
F pawn or H pawn?
F pawn.
Let's say F pawn. Who's better in this type of, if we trade off a pair of rooks, is this also just way better for white? Because
Yeah, this is way better.
So you'd play like king e4? Yeah, what matters is who's really going to queen first. And we're going to bring our king in and play c6. And It's much quicker than black. Black, king f7, king here, g5, and well,
What about C6?
yeah, probably just c6, g4, rook c7, right? King e8.
Capture with rook.
Whoa, 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 no, no.
Rook to C6.
No, just bring your king in. Just bring the king in. No rook takes d7, no rook c6, just bring the king in. And yeah, white is way faster. We can't take the rook. We'd have to move our rook back.
Wait, what about?
But yeah, the d6 pawn is much, that protected pass pawn is much more valuable than any of black's pawns. So, I mean, in the end, after I looked at it, I think black at least was not wrong about resigning. Sometimes I've resigned the game, and then I realized I shouldn't have given up. But in this case, I don't see anything to really stop white at all. You know, might play c5, c6 here. So.
Black act anything to win this game.
Yeah, no, I just hope you guys also agree. Like I think it's a game he resigned way before any of us would resign. But if we look a bit deeper into the position, we consider the rook activity, the pawn structure. This is a really superior pawn structure. So hopefully that'll help you guys avoid maybe getting pawn structures like this as black. When you make weaknesses, you can make weaknesses, but there are going to be consequences, especially if you last until the end game. So it's something to consider from both sides. You see that, oh, you know, sometimes you have a bad position, you want to trade down, you just want to get rid of, let's say you're being attacked, you want to get rid of your opponent's pieces, but you have to consider how your position will be in the end game. So analyzing end games is important because it influences how you're going to decide your middle game position. And in this case, if I show you guys earlier on in the game, black played very recklessly. And that's why their king is on f8 and their pawns are like that, and you know, there was no chance to survive in the endgame after playing so recklessly. So yeah, just some things to analyze, just getting some analysis in, since I know most of you guys don't do endgames much. I didn't do it. I always hated doing it. So just looking at some rook endgames and pawn structure from a recent game.